So how would you, any of you, like to make a difference on designing the designs of this, for example? And now this is obviously content editor. Can I just get a quick feel in the room? How many of you are actually working as developers here? Okay, about a little less than a half. And what about working as content authors, working with putting content on the page and orchestrating the experience, things like that? How many are working with things like marketing, brand marketing, campaigning, things like that? All right, good. There's a good mixture. That's fantastic. One of the things I'm sure some of you are working on is a rich text editor example, something where you're actually creating text on the site. I'm sure you'd like that to work differently for some of you. We have the rules editor, which allows you to do personalization. I'm sure you'd like to have an impact on how that works and how that's using every day, how you're using that every day. And the experience editor as well, where you're actually orchestrating the experience for your consumers and customers. And we're here today because we want to get your feedback about these. The many applications that make up Sitecore's rich product portfolio, as this is really the key to our user experience vision. And it's not only the products that we have today, but the future products that are just sketches, visions in our mind at the moment, are also ones that we'd like to engage you on. Where can we go in the future? And one of the ways that you can do that, and I'll come back to this later, is by joining the Sitecore End User Council. You'll see a sign up on the website, but I'll come back to that much more later. So as I said, I'd like to talk a little bit about our user experience vision, why it's important to us, how we support our vision via user experience research, some of the things we're doing in the future to support that vision, and also a few ways that you can get engaged. So a key part of our vision is getting to the recognition that it's not all about features. It's also about creating products that our customers and partners can use and crave. The usable, desirable phrase was probably coined by Kagan and Vogel in their book, Creating Breakthrough Products. The idea is generally accepted in the user experience world that great experiences are useful, usable, and desirable. So early software products mainly focused on the usefulness, right? That was their key differentiator. As more and more software products match the needs of people, usable became a focus area, while still focusing on the usefulness. Can I do what I need to do? And that's been a major differentiator for the last 5 to 10 years. But now, as people expect products to be usable, easy, intuitive, focus is shifting much more toward creating desirable products. And our UX vision is really to do all of the above. If you look, and you saw some great experience marketing here earlier on the stage from marketing tips using Sitecore from Lars and Chris, we really want to be the preferred tool of the people working to curate the experience, the developers, the marketers, the content authors, the merchandisers who are using Sitecore to curate the customer experience and the dialogue between the brand and the customer. And in order to do that, one of the things that is important to us is to really take the day-to-day lives, the day-to-day business problems of you, and ensure that we have task-based user interfaces which are based on your needs. And in order to do that, we need to provide an experience which allows you to traverse applications, so between applications, to do so seamlessly. And so when you're, for example, creating an email campaign, that you're seamlessly working with the content, with the tests, the subject, the A/B tests in the content, the subject, the lists of recipients that you're using, without having to jump between different applications. You know, one of the problems that we want to solve, and that marketers and other users are experiencing today, is that it's very difficult to have one seamless experience, because you're jumping between application and all the different application silos and data silos that you have. So we're working very hard to understand what are the tasks that you need to do in order to be the custodians of the experience, and how can we make that flow seamlessly. And of course, that also requires a common style, look, and feel for the Sitecore application. You saw a lot of that in Sitecore 8, where we really tried to pervasively apply a common look and style and feel. Now, there's some of the applications which perhaps don't have the same usability paradigm and UX paradigm, but that's a journey that we're on to make that fully seamless for you. Now, in order to get to our vision, we can, of course, intellectually think about how that might work. We can use our creativity. But to be frank, it requires you. It requires each and every one of you, ideally, if you'll work with us. We're extremely interested in getting more and more engaged with our users. And there are lots of activities that we can do and you can do to engage with us. We are committed to listening to you. We're committed to understanding your day-to-day needs, and we're committed to using your input to improve the product. Now, getting to user experience maturity is a journey. Just like there's a customer experience maturity model, which you saw earlier from Lars and Chris. There is also a well-known UX maturity model. As an organization's usability approach matures, it typically progresses through the same sequence of stages, from internal hostility to widespread reliance on user research. And this is a journey we've been going through in the last several years. This is, of course, Jacob Nielsen's well-documented corporate usability maturity model. If in the beginning, obviously, there's the feeling, I don't want to hear about users and their needs. I'm not sure we've ever been there, but it's not uncommon in technology-based organizations. After a while, you get kind of to the developer-driven, design-based, so based on the development team's intuition, essentially. And after a while, you get some skunkworks usability. And we started out with some usability research on the email campaign manager. That was one of the very, very first things we did. And we also did some card sorting studies on engagement analytics to figure out what was important to people when they were looking at data and customer data. And we engaged current and future prospective users of these products to do that. After a while, you have a dedicated UX budget. We have a UX design team. We've got design architects and UX researchers employed with us. And that allows us to build up some more success stories. We've had a lot of work around our media dialogues and our media libraries, both the current ones, but also ones in the future, which really are about the needs of those content authors who are adding and creating rich experiences through these new rich media that whether it be videos or high definition pictures, etc. And we worked with them. We did follow-up studies on the email campaign manager, and I'll show you a few of these in a second. We also did a visual design study. As part of Sitecore 8, we actually took various design agencies and also some internal designs to see how we wanted the future of this common look and feel of Sitecore to be expressed. And we did studies on various users, both internal and external, to see how they reacted and both how useful it was. In other words, does this design distract from what I wanted to do, but also how desirable it made, this visual design made the product for those users. And we took different types of users, different personas to do this. We've also been working with usability studies around our list manager, which again is closely connected to the tasks that you need in, for example, email campaign management. And we've been working with a merchandise manager as well for some usability studies. And I'll show some examples of that later. We also have some usability groups, right? And that's why as you start getting further up this maturity stage, you start to engage even more so in terms of understanding who people are. And so we have multiple UX researchers that have allocated time to think about usability strategy across the organization. So we're starting our studies earlier and earlier. We've got UX training and evangelization, both internally and externally. We're also refining our methodology. We have personas included in every part of our process. Cyclical and iterative usability testing, and kind of for high impact UX projects, future projects. In other words, how are we going to look in 4 or 5 years, or at the very least 3 if we can't look that far into the future. We've got things going on for that. And of course, our UX direction is an integral part of our roadmap. And over time, it's our hope that every single project has this UX research associated with it. We're close to that today. But we're also getting to a point where we need more people to engage with us. And I think maybe there are a lot of people here who don't actually know that you can engage with us. So that's why I'm here today. So, you know, there's various toolkits that you can use in order to understand your users and customers better. And we employ all of these. So we have usability testing. And it follows kind of a cyclical and predictable testing schedule. We also use site visits, where we go out where you are, and we do interviews. We observe how you work with our software. We kind of act as a fly on the wall to understand the articulated and unarticulated challenges that you face. And this is really, really useful for our early stages, our idea and analysis stages. Where we're kind of forming the ideas of how we're going to address your needs and analyzing how we can actually solve them. Obviously, we're continually building. We work with personas, and we're continually building those. And I'll talk more about personas in a second. I'm sure many of you are using them in your work. But really, they are a birth of a common understanding and empathy for the people, not just end users, but the people who are working with our software. We also have an end user council, which is a pool of people who fit the personas that we work with and help to evolve them, who we can involve in these UX activities. And we're also working on some longitudinal research, so essentially maturing with Sitecore. So this is kind of where we follow people throughout the life cycle with Sitecore. And again, I'll go through these one by one so you understand a little bit more about what we're doing and how you can engage and have an impact on the product. So if we take usability studies to start with, there's a famous quote, your product will always get tested. The question is when, and ideally it isn't once it's released, but rather as an iterative process as you go through. And there are various types of usability testing. The great thing about usability tests is the science tells us that you don't actually need that many users to make it valid. Once you get up to around somewhere between 3 and 6 users, the results tend to be the same about how the software works and how it doesn't. I think the key for us is we try and then spread those users out among different sizes of organizations, customers, partners, different verticals or businesses. And one of the ones we started off really early with, especially on the email side, are just explorative usability studies, right? So where you're testing concepts and patterns with a wireframe that can either be a sketch or a Visio diagram or a PowerPoint, just to get a feeling of, does this roundabout work for you? What do you feel when you see this? What would you do? Would you save here? Would you not save? Is the system telling you enough? What would you click on? Those types of explorative tests are really useful when you're trying to understand whether to go for one paradigm or another. We also have kind of what we call our standard or iterative usability studies. And that's really testing a very specific design to see whether it's useful, usable, and then we're able to make changes after the study. And sometimes we go several iterations with the same user where we go in and say, okay, how is this design working for you? And they work with it. We see a few areas that are perhaps problematic. We change those, go back and test it. How do you feel about it now, right? I'll show you a few great examples of that in a second. What we can also do to make it even more iterative is what we call rapid iterative testing and evaluation. So that's really best done with a high fidelity prototype. It takes a little bit more time to prepare, and we usually do that with, pardon me, where we're either creating a new product or an entirely new design, trying to solve a new problem, because it takes a little while to prepare an investment. But essentially, you run an iteration, you run a prototype, you find your issues, you change it, you run another one, you rinse and repeat, you make lots of changes during one big study block to this very, very rich, high-fidelity prototype. And lastly, we also do things, benchmark studies. So these are done to assess various key scenarios, which measure success. So these could be things like, how long did I spend on a task? How long does it take me to do something? Satisfaction ratings. How do I feel? How satisfied do I feel when I use this? And that goes back to the desirability part of the user experience pyramid. And that allows us to set goals for our next release. Hey, this takes people on average 3 seconds to do, or this takes people on average 5 minutes to do. We can do that better. Let's get that time down to 1 minute to complete a task. Let's increase the satisfaction of someone using it by 10%. Right? And we've done this on lots of different, had some really great studies on a number of different applications that we have, whether it be our media dialogue, the new one that you haven't seen yet, some of our email campaign manager, I've mentioned some of them. We've also done it on the content editor and on the experience editor to get kind of longer term learnings as we start to reimagine the way that you work with content as roles shifts and personas shift. So the great thing about usability studies is they actually reduce your development time. And you know, for us, evidence-based decisions are really important. There is, of course, when you're building product, a great deal of creativity and intuitiveness involved, but there's certainly also, we believe that evidence is important, that we at least understand the data before we make a decision. And it gives us a way of having data points on something that can be often feel a bit fluffy when I don't really, this feels weird when I work with this software, you know what I mean? This actually gives us data that we can work with. And also, a lot of the times we try and bring our development teams in to observe it and other members of our teams, and it really opens their eyes to a lot of things that they hadn't realized. Either were problems users or actually things that you are trying to accomplish that we weren't aware of. Of course, you find bugs, and as I say, you very quickly find the patterns. We use kind of fairly simple tasks. Basically, when you do usability study, you create a task that someone needs to complete, and you measure how well they did. It's pretty simple. And this is an example from a first iteration of an email campaign manager study where you see there are 2 big red bits. That's bad. And so we went off and we changed the designs over 3 iterations. And as you can see in the end, we had a very, very high success rating for the tasks we wanted to complete. And that only, we actually ended up making at the end, this is actually the list manager, pardon me. we ended up making 60 design improvements just between those iterations. And they were directly from as a result of that feedback coming from the study participants, so people like you. And just a few things here. I'm not expecting you to read all this feedback, but there were some very specific things that people pointed out were difficult for us that we actually ended up changing. Ways people were having trouble creating lists. They were saying things like having to decipher something is crazy frustrating. This is not intuitive enough for me, etc. So we actually changed the way that you create a list to make it much simpler and have fewer options for people. And what we actually did, before there was just a title, we added a little description. It doesn't seem like much, but just a one-line description in order to really so people understood what it was that was hiding behind this very general kind of create from existing list, as an example, right? We also made some changes with some of our icons. We had an icon, like an envelope icon, and nobody really knew what that did. What's that red thingy? An envelope, they said, right? So we just replaced it with a simple action menu arrow drop down where you could, so you knew when you clicked on this, you'd get more information, and then you'd get some options. And we also had a separate tab on this page for a while, and nobody really knew what it did. It was called a reports tab, and everyone says, "Is this where I have to confirm the report or the import of what's going on here?" And we actually just removed that, made it much simpler. So again, these were just a few of 60 changes we made during just 3 simple studies. I have another really great example for Merchandising Manager. Merchandising Managers, for those of you who don't know, is part of our Sitecore commerce offering. And it allows merchandisers to work with products and SKUs and change, change products, prices, images associated with that product, etc. And in this new version that we're coming with 8.2, one of the new features we had was to support the concept of a multi-SKU search, right? So several SKUs, and you want to do something with it. So the merchandiser could enter a prefix in the search box to indicate that they were searching for SKUs, and then separate the search terms with commas. So for example, the user would put something like this into the search box, SKU colon, and then a long string, right? Separated by commas. And they'd be presented with the search results of those products and quickly add them to their workspace for editing. And we took inspiration from this from Google, where you can enter something like site colon, sitecore.net, comma, Sitecore 8, etc. to search, just only Sitecore.net for the Sitecore 8 term. This did not go over well. So our usability participants voiced concerns over the discoverability of the feature, right? They didn't know how to do it at first, and they didn't remember the syntax, etc. So we actually redesigned it so you didn't need the prefix anymore. You could just type stuff in, comma separated, and you see it up there in the search box. I'm sorry, it's a little small. And then we also realized we needed more space, and this was also one of the more space if you had lots of lists. So we added more. As you started typing, you got more real estate in order to type lots of SKUs, because a lot of these people are working with many products at the same time. And finally, we realized that list of SKUs, it was important to present that in one place in an actionable area. So that actually led us to change a little bit the way that we design the merchandising manager. So this is an example of a search query where you have a list of things where you can multi-select and multi-edit. And we actually took exactly the same approach. What we introduced or are introducing in the next version of Commerce is a bulk edit where you can edit multiple SKUs at once, but do so in an inline fashion. So we introduced an inline editing mode, and we worked with some very large retailers to refine that for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds or thousands of products potentially. And this study actually also highlighted some additional value add-on features that customers would love to see. They didn't make the first cut, but things like copy pasting into cells via Excel, So that's one of my favorite examples of where we actually got direct value from talking to, in this case, merchandisers. So I talked about personas. Do a quick time check here. We use personas to govern our work. We're now at the point where every single backlog item that we have must have a persona associated with it, so that you understand who you're building it for and what their goals are. We're currently working out, we have a lot of customer personas, but we're working out more of our partner personas. There's some overlap there, and we're continually kind of refining this. From my own experience and our experience at Sitecore, there's a number of benefits of using personas. I mean, personas are basically a way of personifying an end user based on research, and then you collate that into a real person who feels living and breathing. Who you can call by name. A lot of conversations in the hall are, but would Emma do this? That's our marketer persona or marketing ops persona. Yeah, I don't know, but would she then talk to Caroline to do that or not? And and it really personalizes and humanizes the experience. So user empathy is really key. You get an understanding of the user. You start to walk in their shoes. What it also does is it allows us to put a framework around our UX research activity, right? So we can actually we know who we're targeting when we're targeting the user. We need more Carolines for this study, for example. That's our content author. Or more Franks. That's our IT pro persona. So it helps us in recruitment as well. And what we did recently, and actually in our last symposium, for those of you who attended there, we put a big persona poster up. We asked people to come in the room and figure out who they were. Like, who do you empathize with here? Who do you think you're most like? And that really helped us refine some of the personas. We had some overlaps in what we thought some people did and didn't do. And very often, depending on the size of the organization, you fulfill several roles. I'm sure many of you do that. Probably some of you more than you'd like to. I know I do. We also have it also allows us a common language. So it gets you away from talking about the generic user, as I mentioned. And ultimately, it lets you make better design decisions. When the designer or product manager are working with the features, they have a clear understanding of the user, the pain points, their core tasks. It actually also helps us with better partner awareness and users. And usage. Sorry, we work with Microsoft Dynamics. And they're big users of the personas, and it's actually, when we talk to them about integrations or just cooperation, we actually use the personas as a guide. We put each other's personas up, see where it matched, and then start to have conversations around real people rather than, let's integrate this feature with that feature. So we actually get a real user experience out of it rather than a bunch of features collected in a product. And of course, another great thing about them is that they're updatable. They don't. These personas don't live in a vacuum. People's roles change. The world changes around us all the time. Our software changes. Our software changes the roles people play. So we're constantly looking to understand more about how people's roles are changing, and thereby also adjusting these personas. Another thing we do at Sitecore is we do customer and partner site visits. It's not snowing in this office, but it is an actual user who we paid a visit to, but they prefer to remain anonymous for some reason. But this helps us. So we actually, as I mentioned before, we sit in and we observe the individuals at work. We ask them questions about how they do things and what they do. We take a look at what tools they actually use, other than Sitecore, right? How do they work best? This helps us ground decision and data. Again, some of this, many of our personas are based on these types of site visits, where we sit back, we observe them. We also ask them to complete scenarios of their daily work to understand those. And again, this really helps. We try and get as many of our team out to do this, including development, QA, not just the UX designers and researchers. And when we do that, it really gives us a much better sense of who people are. And it also opens the door for future collaboration. And many times, when you're having a conversation which used to be abstract, I'm not sure this feature works very well because of this and this, you can actually instead make it very concrete. Bob, when I was visiting him at his site, what he was doing was this and this, and he had this problem. We need to fix that for him. We've also started a pilot project, which we call Maturing with Sitecore. It's what we call a longitudinal study. So basically, we follow someone who's just starting to work with Sitecore, we follow them over time. As you start to learn to use Sitecore, the very first initial steps. Then, as you start to get more confident, we try and visit you again. And see, what other things are you experiencing? What advanced features are you using or not using? How does your knowledge of what you do change the way you work? Are you taking shorter time to do things or longer time to do more advanced tasks, etc.? It helps us find out how you learn. It helps us amend the product to not just be something that we sell, but something that you can grow with. In general, there's always, this graph is showing is there's always going to be a drop in productivity when a user switches to a new product or upgrades to a new version. And we really want to minimize that drop. So we want to minimize the time it takes to get back to the old level of productivity, right? And then, once we've done that, maximize the new productivity level. So this is something we have a couple of customers signed up to this already. And we do around up to kind of 6 visits. We do interviews. We do a productivity survey twice over these 6 to 9 months. And we ask them to keep a feedback tool or a diary of some kind to help us as well in the analysis. And then when we're on the site visit, obviously we do observations over time. So, what do we do with all this, and where are we going with it? So I mentioned earlier about trying to have this, end-to-end seamless user experience, which is kind of our ultimate goal. If people want to prefer, if we want people to prefer us as their experience tool, it needs to be seamless, it needs to be valuable, and it needs to go across channels and across applications. So we're going to continue working with our design consistency. We're going to continue to work with the task execution consistency in our UX vision. So how do I get to complete a task quicker and better? And one of the things we're working a lot on is when you hand off from one person to another. I'm sure in your role, you work with workflows and things like that, where you need to do something, someone else needs to do something in order for you to then continue, and then you hand off to a third person. We're working on those handoffs in our user experience being much, much more seamless. And another thing that, the power of the data in Sitecore, both of the XDB, but also of a lot of the data that's inside the system is really very large. But we have a huge opportunity to surface some of that in a much more consumable and actionable way. So we're working out various ways, even just in working with content, of understanding what content is working well. What did I add last? What's the most valuable content I've had? Hey, what content hasn't been touched in 6 months? What content should I really delete? And surface that in a more kind of dashboard, actionable kind of way. And all the data is there. It's just a question of finding the best way of working with it. And we're hoping to get your help to define how that works. So this is really, I hope, that from the last kind of, I think 35 minutes I've been talking, that you understand that we in order for us to be successful, we need you. We need you to participate with us. We need to understand what your problems are and what your successes are. So I hope that all of you will heed these calls to action in one way or another. We have our Sitecore End User Council. It's essentially a pool of users who help make our product better. As we need frequent access to target different personas and end users, we access this pool of users from across the globe. They give us feedback periodically for newly released and pre-released versions of Sitecore. It helps us get quick and early feedback, and it's a source of UX activity participants. So please sign up. What you get is you get knowledge about the product and you get impact on the product. And of course, I think I've been quite clear what it is we get out of it as well, and the product gets out of it. But hopefully it's a symbiotic process. We're working very hard also on understanding our developer user experience better. So the end user council is definitely not just for business users. We're looking for all types of personas. So if any of you see yourselves fitting into one or more of these roles, go to the SUGCON website. It's right there on the front page. So I think the third spot, sign up, please. We're working across lots of different product areas in the end user council. These are just some of them. I know that one of the things that we're working on right now is around campaign management and how to orchestrate multi-channel campaigns. So if that's something that you're interested in working with, let us know. And some of the things that you may be contacted to do in this end user council is that you test a prototype in a usability study. That could be online, it could be face-to-face. So you may be asked to take an online survey. You can let a Sitecore employee observe what you do and interview you. Or it may just be a quick phone call about, hey, do you use this feature? How does it work for you? When you need to create a social campaign and add a campaign code to that, how do you do that? How does that work for you? Who do you talk to? So please join the end user council. There's a link on the SUGCON front page. The other thing that we have, so one thing is actually doing UX research. Another thing is creating or collecting customer feedback in an organized way. Now we get feedback of all kinds, whether it be feature requests, issues, problems, inspirational ideas, people who've built prototypes, things like that. We get lots of ideas. We're working on ways to make that more transparent and accessible for you all. What I can offer today is that you can get direct access to our product department by taking a time-limited offer survey to tell us about a UX problem you want us to solve. And the link is up there. I hope it's on the website as well, but otherwise it's fairly easy to remember. It's surveymybiggie.com/r/Sitecore-UX. So go and take the survey. It's only for you, and it goes directly to our product managers. And lastly, of course, if you have anything specific that you feel passionate about, that either you'd like us to improve in the user experience, or a business process that you'd like us to support, come and talk to us. There are, I think, about 10 to 15 Sitecore employees here. Come and talk to us. We want to hear from you. And lastly, thank you so much. Like I said, this is incredible. A user self-organized event with so many people from so many places is amazing. So thank you all for coming, and thank you very much to the people who made it happen. Thank you very much.